Welcome to Wheelock's Latin, Chapter 19, Part 2, in which we talk about interrogative pronouns and interrogative adjectives. So, interrogative pronouns. Let's look first at English and differentiate between the interrogative pronoun and the relative pronoun. The interrogative pronoun asks a question. So, for example, who is there? Who is an interrogative pronoun asking a question. Whom do you love? Whom is an interrogative pronoun asking a question, and we use the format whom because it's the direct object of the verb love. What's up? What is the subject, and it is an interrogative pronoun. For all of these pronouns stand in the place of a noun that is unknown. That's why it's a question. Compare that to the English relative pronoun, which uses the same English words, but introduces a subordinate clause that specifies more information about its antecedent. The relative pronoun in English does not ask a question. So, for example, I like ice cream, which I eat every day. Which I eat every day is a subordinate clause introduced by the relative pronoun which. The relative pronoun which refers back to an antecedent, ice cream. In another example, any person who loves cats is a good person. Who loves cats is a subordinate clause, a specific kind called a relative clause, introduced by the relative pronoun who. The antecedent of who is person. So you'll notice that even though the words can be the same as the interrogative pronouns, on the top half of the page, those are introducing questions. The bottom half of the page, they are introducing subordinate clauses. So now let's look at the Latin interrogative pronoun. The masculine and feminine in the singular share one form. Quis, quius, qui, quem, quo. You'll recognize quis, qui, quem, and quo from the relative pronoun. Quis is the only new form. In the neuter, quid, quius, qui, quid, quo. Again, quid is the only new form. In the plural, there are actually different forms for the masculine and the feminine, but the good news is they're exactly the same forms that you already learned for the relative pronoun. So, qui, quae, quae, quorum, 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 quibus, 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 quos, quas, quae, quibus, quibus, quibus. For the which Latin words to use, you use the masculine and feminine, so the quis, quius, qui, quem, quo, forms when you're talking about people, if you're asking a question, who, or whose, or in the dative, to whom, and the accusative, whom, ablative, by or with whom. You use the neuters when you're asking a question about things, so English you would use the pronoun what. Quius of what, qui to what, quid what, quo, by or with what. So for a sample sentence, quis est, we're talking about people, who are you, so we use the masculine feminine form. In the sample sentence, quid agis, literally, what are you doing, we use the neuter. This phrase, quid agis, really comes to mean how's it going, instead of specifically what are you doing. So for the Latin, let's now look at the difference between an interrogative pronoun versus an interrogative adjective. The difference, of course, is the same as the difference between any pronoun and adjective. The Latin forms of the interrogative adjective are identical to the forms of the relative pronoun. So you already know the forms. It's qui, quae, quod, which you can review on page 497. But you probably want to look at some examples of how to differentiate interrogative pronoun versus interrogative adjective versus relative pronoun. So let's look at an interrogative pronoun. Quid videis? What do you see? Quid is the direct object. It asks a question. It's a pronoun because it stands in the place of an unknown noun. So interrogative pronoun. An example of an interrogative adjective, quod signum videis? Which sign do you see? quod is now an adjective telling us more about signum, sign. Which sign do you see? That's different from what do you see. So this is an interrogative adjective. It's interrogative because it still asks a question, but it's an adjective because it modifies the noun signum. You'll notice that the form of the adjective is spelled with quod with an O, and the pronoun is spelled with an I, quid. Last up, let's look at an example of a relative pronoun. Video signum quod videis. I see the sign which you see. Where signum is the antecedent of quod, quod is now a relative pronoun introducing a subordinate clause. It is the direct object of videis, which you see. I see the sign which you see. The form is what we've learned in past chapters, qui, qui, quod, and it is a relative pronoun because it introduces a relative clause. That's it for this chapter. See you next time.